Yo, have you heard about Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome, everyone, to the L7C podcast, the NBA Playoffs edition. We got myself, Martin, here, and we have our basketball aficionado, Evan Debo, with us. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Martin. Thanks for having me on. Let's talk NBA conference finals first and then finals. Ready to rock and roll.
Right. As Evan said, we're going to be talking about the conference finals that just concluded last night. And we're going to do a small NBA Finals preview. But before we talk about the conference finals, Evan, we have to eat our crow because the last episode we had was right before Game 7 of the Clippers and the Nuggets. And we both took the Clippers, but we were both wrong, extremely wrong. The Clippers got smoked in Game 7. So I just want to hit that real quick. Evan, when that happened, what was your first reaction?
I mean, I think at that point you could see a lot of things in terms of body language come to fruition with the Clippers. That, I mean, it was a downhill slide as much as it was the Nuggets' resiliency through what ended up being two straight rounds of overcoming 3-1 deficits. And again, hats off to them. And, if I'm looking for a 1-2 tandem to have for the next 5 years, I think honestly now I want it to be Jokic and Murray. Those guys just killed it this playoffs. But, to the Clippers, I always worry about these teams when you put them together. And, I'm not trying to, there's a lot to be said, obviously, about, and there has been said about Paul George, about Kawhi Leonard, just kind of about the Clippers in general mentality and inability to keep the foot on the gas pedal. But I always worry about when these teams are assembled so quickly like this. And, to an extent, it's going to kind of sound like I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not. I'm holistically not. When the Heat formed, we had that weird year against the Mavericks before they could figure it out. When the Cavs were formed, they were plagued by injuries. The second round of the Cavs, they were plagued by injuries in that first round against Golden State. And lost in 2015. When you put things together this quick, it doesn't always automatically mean championships or championship like we saw with Boston and real early on with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen coming over to join Paul Pierce. But to the Clippers' end, Paul George has been so inconsistent, and that carried on through that series. This series should never have made it 7, Martin. There's been some discussion too about, what was said in the post-game locker room about, hey, let's run it back, or, what have you. I don't know what was actually said, obviously, between Paul George and commanding that locker room. But I think the response from that alleged conversation was, buddy, you couldn't run it back like between quarters for us. Like we have some serious questions about your commitment level to us and what have you. So, I mean, the Clippers obviously have the talent, but it just comes down to, obviously they played a really well-coached team, a team that's been together and has had that cohesion. The Clippers just don't have it. They thought they could roll the ball out there and they'd have two of the best players on the court. And arguably, a lot of times they probably should. I mean, obviously Jokic has really climbed the ranks here in this playoffs, but it's a series that should never have gone 7. It's a series that, really showed some major team chemistry issues with the Clippers. And it also shed a light on, Paul George as a player, as an all-star, as a leader that, we just in a couple stops now with OKC and now LAC after starting off a strong career in Indiana that there's some questions about him. The Clippers they're locked into this. They got one more year to figure this out, or they've got some folks like Kawhi who can already become a free agent after next year again with that player option for a third year, and this could be devastating if they don't figure it out next year. Martin, what do you think?
I thought the game was going to be closer than it was. It felt like it was going to be a close game, and then you've already hit on the body language of the Clippers, which is abysmal. And the Nuggets, they've been well coached. They've shown no fear being down 3-1 multiple times and storming back 2 times. And just watching Kawhi and Paul, I didn't see any leadership. I just felt like they let it get out of hand and they didn't take initiative to, get that layup when you're down like 10 to cut it to 8 or get to the free throw line to slow the bleeding down, anything like that.
Oh, they quit at the end. They quit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was Magic City body language.
Yeah, that was bad. And then also with Doc Rivers, we pegged Doc as one of a top 5. Some people even have him top 3 coaches in the league.
Sure.
But giving up a 3-1 league again, and people have already made jokes that he's given it up during 3 presidencies, which is wild.
That's Spain.
Wild to think about. I think we just need to reevaluate him. I think the Paul George being a superstar, which is hard. It's hard for me to say because he was 3rd in MVP voting last year. But when it comes to big pressure situations, he falters. And if LeBron played like Paul George did during these big moments, he would be on every news station getting crucified. So I just think that with Kawhi too, he's out of the who's the best player in the league, the LeBron or Giannis thing. I think he needs to be just a peg down just after this, even though he's just coming off a finals MVP. But that team, you've already talked about the chemistry. They have one more year to get this ring that they were put together to do. Or we're going to look back at this and think this is one of the biggest NBA collapses of probably our lifetime.
I think, we can't let the fact that, Kawhi also was equally bad in that game. So, I mean, it cannot be understated that the Clippers gave up there down the stretch. I mean, Kawhi in 43 minutes scored 14 points. Paul George in 38 minutes scored 10 points. When both of those guys combined for 24, that's a problem. Trez himself off the bench had 20 and 26. I mean, obviously different roles, what have you. I think I spoke to this heading into the series of, whether the Clippers were going to play the Nuggets or they were going to play the Jazz at the time. That I said all year round, just the chemistry issues obviously were the bigger thing, but the Clippers had not that anybody has an answer, but the Clippers didn't have any bodies to throw at Jokic. I mean, had none whatsoever. They had Zubac, they had, Trez that tried to keep up with him. And then, when they went super, super small, they could roll Jermichael Green out there for a spell here or there. But those aren't guys that you can go against and throw at a Jokic to try to slow him down. And again, I think Jokic is arguably right now, if the season ended today, I think Jokic is a top 3 player in the NBA. We've seen some huge declines from some folks like Kawhi,
Russell Westbrook.
Kawhi's still not better than Jokic because I think he is. But with what Russell Westbrook, absolutely. With Paul George and just the run that Jokic has had. I mean, you that's a personnel issue first and foremost, but it's absolutely a mentality and team chemistry issue for the Clippers. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest collapses too because they really were up 3-1 and they had double-digit leads in multiple games and they blew those leads, and that goes with coaching, giving up toughness. And it's just a shame because we all pegged them in the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers, and then for them to collapse like that was terrible, but hats off to the Denver Nuggets. And going forward, which we'll be paying attention to, because you already alluded to Kawhi could opt out this year if he wanted to. So we're gonna have to.
He will opt out after next year. Yeah.
We'll go on that. But let's stay with the Denver Nuggets because they were the team that advanced to the Western Conference Finals, and they met the Los Angeles Lakers. And that series went 5 games, but the series felt closer than it going 5 games. The Lakers took it 4-1. When you watched the series, obviously LeBron was LeBron, but Anthony Davis was really on top of his game during this series. What did you think when you saw like this series go about? And the question before, if Anthony Davis didn't hit that buzzer beater in game 2, would this have been a different series?
I think so. I mean, even going into game three, I thought there was a potential that, yeah, I mean, obviously it could be tied. Game four itself was even close till way down the stretch. I mean, the Nuggets fought valiantly, and kind of what we just talked about the Clippers, where they didn't have bodies to throw at Jokic. The Lakers switched it up midway through that series and
Yes.
brought in Dwight, so to help offset some of the physicality with things. And Dwight was able to do that. But they had Dwight, they had JaVale, they had Anthony Davis to throw at Jokic, and I mean he still had Jokic like games. I think there was one game in there. I want to say it was game four. I think where he just was not himself. But it was a really valiant effort by the Nuggets, but just one of those things where players exactly like you said, like Anthony Davis really stepped up, and it could have been a different series. That's how close they played it. But, Davis's, step back 3-pointer there on the miscommunication by Plumlee or whatever he was doing, where he went under on a screen and just left him open. I mean, you can't do that. I know that Anthony Davis is not this prolific 3-point shooter, but open shot, got to take it. And Anthony Davis is a shot maker. So, I mean, that really kind of put the nail in the coffin there. And to quote Snoop Dogg from earlier before the season started, we ain't the Clippers and Lakers in 5. And that's exactly where they took it. Los Angeles, these playoffs has been an offensive juggernaut, and that's been, to what exactly you said. LeBron was in his bag all series. You could tell LeBron had that look in his eye. I mean, the points weren't incredibly overwhelming in the closeout game, but LeBron just had that look in his eye where, put his head down, attack the basket, let me do. I think Anthony Davis came back out and said, "Hey," LeBron said, "I got this," basically to the guys, and just to get out the way. And that's a bad dude. That's, in my eyes, that's 1B when you look at all-time best talents, best players, best teammates, best off-the-court folks. When you take all that into consideration, Jordan's Jordan, but if there's at 1A, but if there's a 1B, it's LeBron James, and that's a bad dude. And he had it in his eye. He closed out, and he continued that there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, thinking about, hey, we've got 4 more we still got to do. This really doesn't mean nothing. He's been there. He's won a conference championship now 10 times. Only winning a ring or having an opportunity to win a ring 9 times and walking away with 3. But the Lakers advance. They bring nearly 114 points per game average to the table, third best in the playoffs, and that's including the Mavericks that may not qualify anymore since they only played 6 games, and the Clippers ahead of them by a few points. But they're going to be a tough out, and despite not having a lot of great perimeter shooting, they're a team that puts up numbers and are going to be a challenge. Martin, what did you see out of the Lakers? Some of the adjustments they made, after that game 2 instance. What were they able to do? Do you think to Denver, or was it just kind of more of a, hey, the Lakers 2-star tandem is just way too much for most teams to handle?
And just quickly on Anthony Davis before I answer your questions, we talked about how Jokic during this has been ascending up. I think Anthony Davis is reminding the league that he is a top 5, top 3 type player as well. When you see a lot of top 5s, you don't see Anthony Davis in there a lot, but this series especially, I think people really need to recognize that he's a top 5 basketball player in the National Basketball Association. And to your thing, what you said about the adjustments, late game, there were some late games where LeBron switched to Jamal Murray, and he was playing lockup defense on. Seeing LeBron take that challenge, as we've said, everyone, year 17, 35 years old, turns 36 in December. So seeing him take that challenge was phenomenal. And I just think that Denver also, they were just worn out. I mean, every series they've had has gone 7 games, and they've had to come back 3-1 to the previous two. So when it got to this and they were down 3-1, I just felt like they just ran out of gas. They were able to get that game three. That's just because Jamal Murray was sensational. But when it got to that game five, and like you said, AD said that LeBron said he's got this, and he dropped, say, 38-point triple double in the closeout game. I just feel like the Lakers have been on a mission this year, and then that mission got amplified when Kobe passed. LeBron's been on a mission to reclaim his title as the best player in the league, because some people said he was not. Some people went Kawhi and Giannis, and he's here reminding people just who he is. As you have already eloquently stated, he is a bad dude. So I just felt like they were the two tandems just too hard. It's too hard to guard with Anthony and LeBron, especially on a pick and roll. LeBron could just freight train to the basket, and if you try and stop that, he can just dump it to Anthony, and Anthony can shoot from all over the floor, and he has post-up game too. It's just way too hard to deal with. But hats off to the Nuggets. They'll be here for years to come if they can keep the nucleus intact and keep the coaching. But it just wasn't their time now. And the experience of LeBron and leading the Lakers just put them over the top just this time.
Martin, I've got to, before this podcast's over, I've got to correct the record here, because it's Monday at about 4:27. We're both doing this after work. I'm going to chop it up to not so much just being sloppy, but just being tired and misremembering. I think I said it wasn't too much of a noteworthy statistical performance by LeBron in Game 5. Yeah,
yep.
38, 16, and 10. Now LeBron. Now I was thinking. I think it was closer to like 28, 10, and 12 or something. But yeah, I need to correct that. Or Justin, our producer, I need to slip him a 20 or something to edit that out and edit this part out. But that's bad on my part. That's a LeBron James dad mode. I'm just a bad dude, and my wallet says it, and I'm going to town and doing it. So that's a little off on my end, but no, yeah, a absolute dominating LeBron performance. Some numbers on Anthony Davis's playoffs: averaging 28.8 a game, 9.3 rebounds a game, 3.6 assists, shooting 81% from the line, 61% from the field, and obviously, again, he's not known as a 3-point shooter, but 37%, you got to step out on that guy and close out. I mean, especially with a game on the line. I know he only averages a little more than 2.5 or so 3-point attempts a game, but Anthony Davis is a bad dude. I mean, if you looked at all active or whoever's left in the playoffs right now, including the conference finals participants and everything else, Anthony Davis is your leading scorer still left at that high of mark. So yeah, just an impressive thing. And, we've seen stars kind of fumble the spotlight. And so this is new waters for him. This is new territory. Nothing's given. I mean, he still has to perform. I mean, obviously the skill's there, the talent's there. If he shows up, I mean, it just breathes. I mean, he's basically a bare minimum is an 18 and 8 guy. But it's obviously he's way more engaged than that. It's easy to make the Kobe Shaq comparison in terms of tandem. I mean, obviously they have different methods and things of that nature, but you would talk about as great of a 1-2 punch as we've had in a while. It's these two guys. It's LeBron and Anthony Davis. And, the Lakers compromised a lot, giving up, the entire farm for Anthony Davis when he forced his way out of New Orleans. But I mean, when you've got a dude like that, it's worth the, hey, what happens if he gets injured and we've got nobody behind him kind of thing. It's worth all those things, because the Lakers are in the NBA Finals. They have they're going to have, in the series they're playing, they're going to have the 2 best guys on the floor in the series. And no, I'm excited for it. I picked the Lakers to win it all before we started the playoffs. Before we broke for COVID back in February, just the role LeBron was on. I think if LeBron would have had 2 more months of an actual regular season, I think it would have been a much closer MVP vote than what it was with only 16 first place votes for out of 109
Yeah.
or something like that. And we want to talk about voter fraud and mail-in voting issues and everything else. The voters mailed in this one by only giving this dude 16 first place votes. That's the major error in voting in America right now. Obviously, that's a joke, but it's what we expected. It's what Snoop Dogg expected, and the Lakers are on their way with their high scoring tandem and some great supporting cast for those guys. Caruso had some huge games in this series. Again, we talked about Dwight and his physicality, and I think somewhat of it's kind of a tough fake guy for Dwight or a fake tough guy for Dwight at this stage, but. He brought in exactly what he did. He pestered Jokic. He was one of three bodies to just chip away and foul and hack. And it's part of the reason why Lakers took
Yeah,
this
and
in
the last
five.
thing I want to say on this series, because you brought it up with the MVP voting, I really didn't have a problem with Giannis winning the MVP. I just
No, I
the
didn't.
disparity of the vote.
Just
Yeah,
too big a spread.
that was too big a spread from the 16th first place votes. But that's all I'm gonna say on that. But as the greats say, it doesn't matter if you're the one hosting that trophy at the end. That's what matters. So
From the West Coast to the East Coast, we have the Miami Heat advancing to the NBA Finals after dispatching the Celtics in six. I think we both said that this series
yep,
was going to go 6 or 7, and I
yep.
think we said it could go either way. I know I thought the Celtics. Again, it was so tough to tell, but I think all along I thought the Celtics were going to come out the other end of it. But this was a team with Boston that was there with the Heat in games for the most part. Obviously there were some changes there in the fourth quarter, but I mean, this is a team that really struggled, I think, in the series with depth, finding any kind of answer in the front court for Bam defensively, and then they had so many turnovers. They were like a breakfast bakery, man. Like it was very unclear. That's not a Boston Celtics Brad Stevens coach team to turn the ball over that many times. But I mean, they really struggled giving away free points to the other team, which kind of led to some disparities, like you saw finally when the Heat went on that late run last night in the closeout game in Game 6. Celtics were up at the 9:14 mark of Game 6, 96-90. They would go on to be outscored 35-17 in the remaining 9:14 and lose the game 125-113. Martin, just generally open it up here for discussion. What did you see about last night's game? What did you see about the series? Um, he advanced to the NBA Finals for the first time since the Big Three era with Bosh, Wade, and James under another great coach in Eric Spoelstra. We can't say enough about him. Just comments on the
I
series.
think since we've had the topic of ascending and descending during this bubble, I think Eric Spoelstra needs to be in the top three coaches in the NBA discussion pool right now, because for what he's been able to do with this team, with him, Jimmy Butler, and all the players to make it to the NBA Finals, bubble or not, is just a tremendous achievement. And for the people watching the league, we're seeing some young stars being born on the Heat with Tyler Hero, especially that game 4 when he had 37 points. And that game 6 where you had Bam having 32 and 12, 14 rebounds. So I just think the Heat really have some budding young stars that can really make some noise throughout the future. Well, they're making noise now, so that's null and void. And then Jimmy Butler, we've paid attention to every rumor saying he's a team cancer from Chicago to Minnesota to Philadelphia. And for him to land on the Heat team and lead this team to the finals just proves all of them wrong. And we know Philadelphia is kicking themselves that they let this man go to keep Tobias Harris. Like, hindsight's 2020, but that has to be one of the dumbest moves, I think, from a basketball perspective in the past year. But I just think the Heat, you brought up the fact last time we talked that you get more Detroit Piston vibes from the Heat. And after watching the series, I completely agree. Like they are just
And it's
they're a team.
and it's almost for the opposite reason for on the offensive side of the ball as opposed to defensively. I mean, it's instead of a defense by committee, it's an offense by committee
Yeah,
with guys that just don't. They're just kind of even scoring across the board and even production, I guess I should say, if we're going to keep it broad. But yeah, I think I see it too.
yeah, and they're they're not gonna be an easy out when it comes to the NBA Finals, I think by any means. But just hats off to them. I just felt like Boston, they had a little bit more talent, and I thought they were gonna at least take it to 7. But Miami, the way they played, they were just like, we got to end this now. And even Miami, when they won, they had multiple different scores throughout the like game 2. Gordon Dragic led the team in scoring. Then Tyler Hero. Then there's Jimmy. Then there's Bam. It's like they're an offense by committee, and I love seeing those type of basketball teams make it far.
I talked about some of and have hit on some depth issues, and I've been critical of the Celtics for that. While they don't have quality of depth, I mean, if you look at last night's game, with the exception of a 5 kind of, hey, give me some breathers around timeouts minutes from Solomon Hill, Eric Spoelstra's got this lineup whittled down to a 7-man rotation essentially, with Iguodala, Hero, Dragic, Robinson, Adebayo, Crowder, and Butler. So, I mean, you're really only swapping in and out 2 guys off the bench throughout, I mean, in heavy minutes across the board. Every one of those guys, minus Iguodala, who was huge last night, 15 points, a guy who's battled some nagging injuries throughout this playoffs. He's going to his 6th straight finals. I mean, that's a guy who, when history looks back, you might say, just depending on how his career ends up and stuff too, and how much he's got left in the tank after this, that's almost kind of like a Robert Horry, like golden role player type guy for how many times he's making it, how many rings he could walk away with when it's all said and done. But I mean, so he was huge last night. I think for the Heat, yeah, they're. I also see obviously the OKC comparisons with the young guys. I mean, their 2 best guys are under 21, 22 years of age, and Bam and Tyler Hero. I mean, and that's not a knock on Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is who he is, but I mean, when you talk about their 2 best players, like in terms of upside, like in 5 years, these are going to be their guys, like leading their thing. But I mean, they just pick and roll Boston's defense to death and everything else. I mean, I think it's not enough. I mean, Brad Stevens, I think, is still a top 5, 6 coach in the league easily, probably top 5. But I mean, looking back at the Toronto series too, I've heard some other people bring this up, and I don't think they're wrong. I mean, Toronto outcoached Boston in that series. And that says a lot about Nick Nurse in Toronto. But I think the gap widens a little bit between your Spoelstras, your Nick Nurses, those kind of guys, and Billy Donovan, who's now in. Not saying Billy Donovan is above Brad Stevens, but I think the gap widens at the top with Eric Spoelstra and Nick Nurse and Brad Stevens a little bit. Like, I mean, nobody's out there with a tape measure. Nobody's out there with the football hash markers marking off the distance between the two. But I feel like there's a little bit of gap there, and it's growing almost. I mean, Jason kind of frustrated me a little bit in this series, and he's still young. I mean, I get that. He's only, 22, something like that. But, I mean, just a lot of times, that's a bad dude that in time he'll figure out, hey, I'm 6'10" or whatever. I'm a physical monster. I can just attack the bucket at will. And he's going to develop a little bit more of a passer too, and figure out that, hey, I've got the tools to be an offensive force, not to his level, but like a LeBron, like a Kawhi, like a Giannis attacking the bucket. But I mean, it just drives me nuts sometimes how much he settles for the long twos or the last resort bailout, drive to the lane. They put up the wall like they do on the Westbrooks and the Giannis's, and instead of finding the guy on the last rotation, dropping baseline or kicking it back out, that he'll kind of force something that's not there. So, I mean, he'll figure that out in time. But, obviously he was the guy that when I'm looking at why I think that the Celtics lost in the series, I think he's his youth really showed out there. I mean, he was way better at 19 in that game 7 where they almost took the Cavs a couple of years ago. But I think he's obviously got a lot of room to grow. The Celtics obviously had no answer for Bam. I watched so many highlights throughout the series of Daniel Tice. God love him, and he's trying, and he's done so well this year in some of their defensive lineups and their defensive efficiency ratings and what they've been able to do to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But I mean, he's just no answer for Bam, just getting beat off the dribble routinely. Gordon Hayward was not himself whatsoever. And, this is year 2 with different nagging injuries for Gordon. And then you add in a pandemic too. And I mean, like last night, I mean, they had Hayward on Hero for many possessions. And you're like, what are you doing? This guy just doesn't have the footwork to keep up with Tyler coming off screens and chasing him around. And especially with nagging lower leg injuries that he's working his way through to come back in the series. That they're going to have to figure something out. I heard a creative Cavs trade idea today. Andre Drummond for Gordon Hayward. Would you do it?
Are you asking me if I would do it?
I'm asking you if you would do it. Yes.
Oh, well,
he checked Cavs trade time because we've got nothing else to talk about in Cavs land. The Cavs are back in the bubble right now. Again, if you're outside of Ohio listener, Martin and I obviously grown up watching the Cavs, have an affinity to the Cavs. I personally am a diehard Cavs player, so that's why we're particularly harping on them. But now that's an interesting one. I don't know that he'd play a whole lot of minutes for Boston because of how bad he is defensively,
yeah.
But that's a sizable force that could bang against a Bam Adebayo and what have you. So that's and I think the Cavs would love to have a veteran wing come in and mold some of these young players too. So I mean, heck, I'd entertain that.
Yeah, I think I'm on the entertain on that trade. If they really feel like Miami is going to be the team in the way because of Bam and Tyler Hero, I don't know if Drummond would be the answer because his defense is kind of piss poor. So they might have to try and go defensive, big, shoot. I don't know. Just to flip that, would you do it for Tristan Thompson?
Yeah, you might. But so yeah, I mean, so he's a restrictive free agent right now. All the Cavs players really want Double T back, but obviously he's a guy that I was almost laughing at the time because around the trade deadline, diehard Celtics fans like Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo were like, Tristan Thompson, yeah, that's a buyout candidate. Like the Cavs are just going to give away him for free and lose his bird right, sign him and lose the chemistry and everything else. And that was essentially pre-pandemic, that trade deadline. So Tristan still has value in this league. He's a guy who can step out and, if you got to get him in a switch and like somebody messed up and he's on a guard, he can hold his own or at least buy time and not foul and really contest shots with some perimeter guards are going to dance. But, if that were the case, Celtics might need to send me back. Assuming you'd almost do somewhat of a sign and trade in that scenario, I guess. I think the numbers would still be a little high, but if I'm the Cavs, like, I don't know, throw in another one of those Celtics young wings or something, then we'll figure out how to get the money to work. Like who's the Indiana kid that they have, Romeo Langford. Throw me in like a Romeo Langford, and I'll say sure. We'll get rid of 2 of our like 7 centers on the Cavs, but I digress. That's way too much conversation on the Cavs right now. So let's get back to the Celtics. Yeah. So obviously that's a need. They need a big body like a Tristan Thompson to be able to contest with somebody in the post. But again, kudos to the Heat and the Heat culture and Miami Vice and all things. Goran Dragic is your leading scorer on this team, and between Dragic and Adebayo and Butler being over 18 a game, that any one of those guys can go off. Butler's kind of cooled it down a little bit on the crazy scoring numbers, and then you've got it at 16 something a game. You've got Tyler Hero, who is just literally a scoring tornado ready to be unleashed. He can fill it up from anywhere. I'm surprised guys don't kind of chip him a little bit more defensively. As you saw like in recent years with the Cavs Warriors series, with that tiny frame, reminds me a lot of Curry. But I mean, what a rookie campaign for one Tyler Hero. So
Yeah, man, they're a good team. Like it's fun to watch them, and I'm going to continue watching them, obviously, because they're in the NBA Finals, and now they are going to be playing the Miami Heat. The finals actually start Wednesday, the 30th. So that'll be
yes,
game
yeah.
one, and there's no home court since it's all still in the bubble. And when you look at this Heat team going against this Lakers team, what are your like initial thoughts? Do you think, first of all, do you think the Heat stand a chance to make this competitive?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do. I think at a certain point, the Lakers are really good at first and foremost outscoring folks. I mean, they've got such a high profile offense, and they're going to be a huge matchup problem, which is going to keep them in games, even if LeBron or AD were to get into foul trouble or what have you. If one of those two guys were to get themselves into a scenario where, hey, we've got two quick fouls on Davis for trying to guard out of Bio or what have you. But yeah, I mean the Heat will be competitive in this. I don't know if I don't know if this is going to go beyond five. I'll be honest. I think the games will be close. I think the Lakers are that heavily favored. I could see this going from, and I'm not trying to knock the Heat. I mean, I think they just haven't run into a 1-2 punch like this. They've done really good things with when they played the Bucks. They really clamped down on Giannis, but the Bucks didn't have that second top five player like the Lakers have, or a top 10 player. Same thing with the Celtics. They had obviously Jaylen Brown as a heck of a talent, but Jaylen Brown isn't LeBron James or Anthony Davis, and Jason Tatum, for as good as he is, he's not either of those guys either. I mean, I think it's the Lakers year. I think this, on the LeBron note, personally, just watching him over the years, and LeBron's kind of the reason I got into basketball. That LeBron ran into that buzzsaw of ridiculousness when Kevin Durant joined a 73 win Warrior team. There was nothing that could be done when you got a team that ridiculously stacked with some salary cap loopholes. But this is almost LeBron's, hey, I'm going to get one back here kind of year, unless something catastrophic happens, unless AD gets a serious injury or LeBron gets a serious injury. I think it's the Lakers series to take. I think I tweeted out last night, LA in five, and and that's again not a knock on Miami. We talked about how young and they've got a long way to go. I do see a lot of OKC comparisons with them, with some of the young talent they've got. They'll continue to build and what have you. So I mean, that said, I mean the bubble has shown us everything. Game 7 could pop up on us. I feel like I just need to get it out there and say, in case the unthinkable happens. I don't foresee that happening. I would like the Lakers in 5. I'd like to think that you're probably of the same mindset. What's your prediction, Mark?
I do think the Lakers will win this series in about 5 games. But since we've already talked about it and you already have brought it up, the Lakers are heavily favored. They have the dynamic duo that they have. It's almost like the Lakers versus the Pistons back in 04, 03. So I'm just putting that caveat out there.
Yeah, but they don't have 60-year-old Karl Malone
They
on their
don't,
bench
but they
that they
they
need
have
to
a
get, and 70-year-old Gary
that's
Payton.
true, but would you take that Lakers bench over the current Lakers bench?
Yeah, definitely.
And this it's the same premise that they have the best perimeter and best big man right now against this team that just plays together. I'm just putting out there. I don't think Miami is going to win. I think LA is going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if they pushed it to 6, maybe 7. And I'm conflicted personally because I really like how this Miami team plays.
Oh,
I would actually
absolutely.
love to see them win the title, but I would just love for the city of Los Angeles to win this title for Kobe and the family.
Kobe.
So personally, I'm conflicted on who I want to win, but basketball analyzing, I think the Lakers will take it in a competitive 5-game series. I don't think you'll see any blowouts in this one.
So let's put our Miami Heat uh, nice adult beverage by the poolside and white fedora hat on. We're looking through heat colored glasses here at this series. What does Miami have to do to change our minds about this in the first couple games? What if you're Eric Spoelstra? What is your game plan going into this to try to? I mean, it sounds like from basically what we both said and what most will say, continue to perform above expectation, to continue to perform above experience with some of these younger players, play above our abilities as a team, much as we saw Toronto do losing Kawhi Leonard, much as we've seen with the Jazz do, or not the Jazz, the Nuggets do, overcoming all those elimination games. What do you think the Heat need to do in terms of matchups, in terms of game plan, what have
Game
you?
plan, they got to muck the game up. That like we've already talked about how the Lakers can score like no other right now. They really got to keep these games in low scoring. If the Lakers are getting around 100 to 110, the Heat stand no chance. So I really think they got to make this a grimy, grind out type series, frustrate AD and LeBron as much as you can. That's my number one thing. The second thing from what they did the last series, keep that scoring. Like if you look at the scoring, Bam was about 21, Gordon was 20, Tyler was 19, Jimmy was 19, Duncan 12, Jay 11. If they can keep that balanced scoring going, and let's say LeBron and AD both average 25 apiece, but the rest of their bench is in the single digits, I think that's a recipe for success. If they can all get 3 to 4, maybe 5 people scoring in double digits, that helps. And those are my two things. And Eric Spoelstra out coaching Frank Vogel. I think those three things are their best chance to win.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would add, I mean, if you're going to come up with a game plan, I mean, 17 years of LeBron James have told me that there is no game plan for LeBron James. If your goal in there is to say, you know what, I've got Andre Iguodala, I've got Jay Crowder, I've got Jimmy Butler, I've got three really really stout defensive players to throw at LeBron James for 48 minutes, and to frustrate him and to disrupt passing lanes. And if that's your game plan, I mean, you're going to get some turnovers off him as much as LeBron handles the ball and plays point guard for basically long stretches of time, except for when he plays a little bit more off ball when Rondo comes in. That's great and all, but that's not going to get it done, and that's going to result in those guys moving away from supporting Bam with and Kelly Olynyk and trying to guard Anthony Davis. And God bless Kelly Olynyk, but if you're the number two option to try to defend Anthony Davis, that's a problem. You're not going to keep up. I've got obviously it's such a drop off from Bam to Kelly in terms of extra bodies on the bench. Dare I say, you want to talk about 3 decade people? Do we see some? We will see some regardless. This is his last year, even if it's in the waning minutes of whatever. We will see Udonis Haslam in the series
Yeah.
before it's all over. A guy who has been there through all three Heat runs, with Shaq and Wade, with the big three, and then now again with this Renaissance kind of OKC Detroit Pistons. We're gonna try to sneak one here team. Heck, they might need to. I don't know they're going to get anything from him. Let's be honest. He doesn't have much to contribute at this age, but he will play a minute in this series just in terms of hey, thanks for the career. Whether they're closing out or whether they're down by 20 in the final closeout game for the Lakers, like he'll be in there. But I digress. I mean, I think back to what I would do. I think you've got to do the opposite. I think you've got to say, you know what, chips on the table. Anthony Davis has never been in the NBA Finals before. We've got Andre Iguodala who's been here. We've got the veteran leadership of Eric Spoelstra and the coach on the extended coach on the bench, Udonis Haslam, who've been here. We've had Goran Dragic, who's been around this league many times. Jimmy Butler, who's been on a number of playoff teams and has well more playoff experience than Anthony Davis. That's a guy I want to try to get in foul trouble early, because then you have LeBron basically running with the bench guys, and those guys depending on running shots. I'm going to go after Anthony Davis any chance I get on the offensive end. We saw with the Jazz, they did everything they could to keep, or sorry, I keep saying the Jazz and Nuggets. We saw with the Nuggets, they tried to do everything they could to avoid the Davis and Jokic matchup. And the Lakers would keep Davis defensively on, some other folks in the series and not guard him to avoid getting in foul trouble. But if I'm the Heat, that's my mentality, is I've got to tag to them. You're right. They have to muck it up as much as they can. I mean, Miami's not a stout defensive team, which is going to be the problem. I mean, Lakers are, in my opinion, better defensively than Miami. Is not that Miami can't be disruptive and what have you. But, I think the Lakers are also got to be prepared for small ball. Because obviously, once Bam comes off the court too, and then even Bam at the 5, that's an extra shooter, and you can't run. It's got to be almost a reverse back to the Houston series for LA. You can't run two bigs, especially when that fourth guy's got to chase around and Andre Iguodala or a Jay Crowder, who are going to log heavy minutes at the 4. Those are guys who can attack and get into the body if they were to, go to the paint and potentially get Anthony Davis in trouble. I mean, they're going to have to basically be a one big lineup throughout the series, in my opinion. But that's going to be my mentality if I'm Miami. I'm going to rely on the fact that I've got a veteran coach who's been there, who's won NBA championships, who outcoached Brad Stevens, with given the opportunity, who outcoached another Coach of the Year winner in Budenholzer and the number one team in the East in the Bucks. And I'm going to try to get Anthony Davis in foul trouble. I'm going to try to frustrate. I'm going to try to put my team in positions where it's LeBron trying to depend on Rajon Rondo, Alex Caruso, Kyle Kuzma to win them games when we pack the paint on LeBron and just let LeBron get his. And then that's all you can hope for. And just know that you've got a really good young team that can run a lot of minutes. And some of those guys are older across the court in purple and gold with you. And we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a really exciting series. I'm excited to see these young Miami Heat does, become Bucks, but not to use a big deer analogy. Sorry, Bucks. In this series and get some experience behind them. And again, we like the Lakers here, but I think the bubble's shown us some crazy things can happen. And if that happens, I'll be ready to absorb it, soak it in, and the finals are as big a stage as it gets. I'm excited for some early October NBA Finals action for the first time ever.
And as we said, the finals start Wednesday night. Make sure you tune into that. We're both going to be obviously watching very closely, since we're going to be back to talk about.
We'll be live tweeting it most likely in between games. Martin, how can they get a hold of you on Twitter? It's at MNA00. Is that correct? And then I'm on Twitter at Evan Debo PR. Feel free to join in with us and give us your takes. And Martin, another opportunity I want to take here. I work in public relations and communications as we continue to build the podcast network and stuff here. We've seen some great engagement rates with folks across the board with, obviously you facilitate a lot of different podcasts and a lot of different topics, but just want to take another opportunity here to thank everybody who's listening with us, who spends their morning commute or their evening commute or doing chores around the house or grad school work, wherever life takes you, and you decide to turn on a couple knuckleheads like Martin and I and some other folks we have in the frame here. And we appreciate support, appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully we can keep delivering on content and growing this thing out.
Yeah, ditto to everything that Evan said. We're completely humbled by the support we're getting from everyone. Yeah, just listening to some guys like us who we're like you. We're just some normal guys. This isn't our full, we still work our 40+ hour jobs every week, and we just do this because it's an outlet and we know the stuff we're talking about. And every time I come and check and see the numbers on, the Western Conference Finals just finished, let's go listen to what Martin and Evan said the previous round, see what they were thinking about it. Or, it's great to see the engagement we're having on all platforms, and we're going to be here for the long haul. So get used to us.
Martin, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to these finals on Wednesday. It'll be another good showing on the top stage that basketball has to offer, and we'll see if LeBron's adding another ring to it when it's all said and done for number 4.
Number 4, no problem, man. Can't wait to watch the finals. Can't wait to talk to you during the finals. Thank you all for listening to the L7C podcast. We'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.